Hello my friends, here we are from the group 8 consisting of me, Ella, Sulfan and Muhis. We'll explain our next material about foreign language aptitude, or we usually call it bakat bahasa asing. Okay, we go to the next slide. Okay, so does anyone know what aptitude is? Aptitude is a natural ability or skill, while language aptitude is the psychological formulation behind the intuition that some people have achieved for additional language learning while others seem to struggle. And in this chapter we will examine aptitude, a construct that is largely cognitive in nature. Okay, the next slide is the correlational approach to cognition, and affect in psychology and SLA. The first is cognition. Cognition is thinking, which is more inclined to the activity of gaining knowledge, including awareness, feeling, and so on. Know that requires thinking in it, and affect is feeling. Then cognition is trying or wanting, that the part of mental life that has a lot to do with effort, including desire or willpower. In Ortega's books, it is explained that there are three views on this matter, including those from traditional psychologists, contemporary and SLA researchers. Psychologists' interested in individual differences have traditionally made a distinction among three concepts. Cognition refers to how information is processed and learned by the human mind. However, contemporary psychologists recognize one must consider cognitive, and affective explanation in a symbiotic fashion in order to fully understand individual differences. Likewise, SLA researchers are increasingly more willing to examine aptitude, motivation, and other sources of individual differences and L2 learning in the context of complex interrelationship among cognition, and affect. The next is learning and not learning, French, Kaplan versus Watson. In this part, two series from the same person learning French L2 are exemplified. They experience difference in language skills or result. Alice Kaplan very successful, devoid to French from childhood. Then Watson, surprisingly unsuccessful at spoken French. And how to explain the vast differences in outcomes in such learners? Even though Watson has participated in the course, the question is how people study hard still cannot master second language. So from this we know that the researcher cannot explain that highly educated, creative and risk-taking individuals can always master the language discussed here in spoken French. The conclusion of this subsection is that we cannot explain radical variability in individuals who, for various elective or indirect reasons, attempt to study second language. The next is language aptitude, almighty. I dare to say no. Bakat bahasa semua kuat, tidak. So, my answer is no. And underestimating positive research findings in this chapter, there are still many unanswered questions, for example, true nature and relationship with factor. And what should be maximized is cognitive, affective, and contextual earlier that. And the last slide I'm going to explain is aptitude as prediction of formal L2 learning rate, the MLET. Measure often by MLET or Modern Language Aptitude Test. This MLET has proved very successful as a predictive test of language learning speed in formal instruction settings and remains the most widely used aptitude instrument in the United States and in translation in other countries. It consists of 5 subtests designed to take advantage of 3 cognitive abilities: grammatical sensitivity, phonetic coding ability, and memory capacity. Despite the increasingly critical assignment of tests and the availability of alternative aptitude instruments, MLET remains immensely popular among SLA researchers even today. Ultimately, however, no correlational prediction or test administration can tell us whether language talent really exists, and if so, what is made of. I think that's all for me. The next presentation will be explained by Muhis.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, I will explain about aptitude and age. From research conducted by second language acquisition researchers, they found that it is easier for children to learn a second language than adults. This is because children have the cognitive and linguistic ability to learn it fully implicitly, whereas adults will rarely ever achieve full success in learning a second language because they try to learn language through analysis and analogy. Even though this is the case, it is also still a hypothesis. The basis of the hypothesis is that the involvement of the explicit learning route is less proficient. Sometimes adults have problems in their analytical and memory skill. Otherwise, children have a uniform mechanism of learning language silently or intuitively, or I can say it is implicit approach. Then the question is, does aptitude affect learning a second language at certain age? De Keyser found that aptitude is only important for adults, but not for young learners. In a partial replication of Johnson and Newport with 57 US immigrants from Hungary, from the result of the assessment in the MLAT, it was the next is aptitude matter under explicit and implicit learning condition. After we discuss about the relation between aptitude and age, an extension of the question that arises regarding aptitude and age in second language learning is whether aptitude is important in all learning conditions. Christian from America and Helmut from Canada say that aptitude only has an effect on explicit learning because such learning involves conceptually driven processing that relies heavily on overall intelligence and academic ability. Aptitude might not be a problem under condition of implicit learning. Robinson makes a counterproposal, claiming that the next is multidimensional aptitude. Several second language researchers have contributed related theories about aptitude that will influence new research in the future. Some of them are Peter Robinson and Peter Skehan. Robinson proposed the aptitude complex hypothesis, which is based on the work of psychologist Richard Snow. Robinson takes three premises from Snow's work. The first is that ability has effect in complex combination that together facilitate processing and learning in a particular instructional context. To illustrate this, assume that students have differences in learning from requests, either for better or for worse. Regarding Snow's first premise, two aptitude complexes will be involved in explaining specifically who some learners are better than others at benefiting from requests. The first complex is noticing the gap, and the second is memory for contingent speech. The first complex involves pattern recognition and processing speed, while the second complex involves phonological working memory. Some preliminary evidence suggests that the second complex is important to requests in a study by Jennifer Field. Students with better phonological working memory would be less limited by the length of the request. However, Bigelow disagree because students with low literacy skill, maybe because they come from dominant oral language background, may be less affected by length restriction and therefore less agree with working memory differences. Likewise, with Mackey, he argues that the weaker memory for contingent speech may have worked against students with low memory who were able to hold on to the data offered during interaction. In addition, they may not necessarily. And the last is the future of second language aptitude, playing it to one's strength. The possibility that arises from the proposal put forward by Robinson and Skehan is the instruction that plays to the strength and preferences of certain profiles in students will bring about the most learning for them. This is an old hope in educational psychology investigated in what is known as aptitude treatment interaction research. So the question here is, does language instruction match with different second language aptitude profiles? To answer this question, West conducted an evaluation through the practice of streaming Canadian employees who had to learn French. They will be placed based on their MLAT score into the course type that best matches their aptitude strength. They are scored through